you.
Right. So we need to figure out.
But in
Just need one.
no,
Just need
no.
one.
You guys
Have it on
ready?
a day, it has to start at
Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just catch up. We got a million things to do before 7 o'clock. All right, so at exactly 6:30, I'm going to call the Tuesday, April 15th, 2025 Pembroke School Committee meeting to order. Would you all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I don't have the sign-in sheet, Mike. Is it there? Did anyone want to speak? Oh, it's empty. Okay. So nobody had signed in to speak. Thank you, by the way,
Somebody
to the
raised their-
audience.
Yes, I think somebody raised her.
Somebody raised their hand in the back.
I wanted to, depending on what the topics are this evening.
Well, so we have an agenda. The agenda is there.
Yeah, I have it.
Did you want to speak?
On one of the,
Can you come to the microphone and give your name and your address, please?
yeah, I'm Marielle McCann on 94 Pleasant Street.
Thank you.
My concern is of one of the bills, if there's going to be something on whether gendered athletes are going to be discussed tonight.
So we have our policy subcommittee is reporting back on something that we asked them to go and investigate, yes.
Yes, so I wanted to give some opinion on that, once
Yeah, now
that is
it's-
appropriate. Do you want me to do it right now?
Yep.
So from my understanding, it's on whether trans kids have to play in their assigned birth gender.
So can I just be clear about something? Because
Yes.
it's actually very important distinction. That is not what it's about.
Okay,
It is about whether or not biological males should be on biological female teams or biological females should be on biological male teams. It is not just about any kid that may identify as transgender. So I just need to make that really clear.
how is that different?
We have males that identify as males that play on certain female teams at the moment.
Okay, do you have a spot for non-binary or intersex?
So I'm just trying to clarify for you. It's just not
Okay.
and it's not solely about transgender kids, but you can give us your comments.
Okay. One thing I just want to say that I think that we can all agree that the value of school sports, teamwork, sportsmanship, leadership, self-respect, self-discipline, relationship building, perseverance, fitness, and more. Trans kids, like other students, deserve the same chances to learn these values as well. My kids aren't trans. They are biological, what they identify as. So why do I care? I care because my kids already play sports with trans athletes. I see them shunned from their schools and their parents desperate for belonging. My daughter weighs about 100 pounds and plays a direct contact sport with kids of all genders. She happens to be one of the co-captains. Trans kids are not holding yours back. If we want to support girls' sports, we should be providing more funding and more opportunities to play, and also creating stronger laws to protect female athletes from harassment and abuse, not banning transgender youth from participating in sports. That's it.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Was there anyone else that signed up that wanted to speak? Okay, hearing none. So we don't have our state champions here because they're competing still. So they were running a little later. So when they do get here, what I would likely do is break, even if we're in joint session, and we'll recognize them at that time. Any adjustments to the agenda? Communications? Anybody get any?
I can give a report on going to the
legislative dinner for
Oh, yeah,
MASC.
yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. So last week I went to the Legislative Division 3 dinner for the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and I was able to meet with other school committee members in our division and network with them, as well as hear updates from our legislative leaders. So we heard from Kathy Lenatra's office, as well as Michelle Badger, and there's one other state rep, which I can't remember the name right now, but they did give us an update on some things that are related to a school budget, which I think are relevant in terms of transportation, as well as there was another bill about increasing the special education stabilization fund in terms of the percentage that we're able to pre-buy. That's a bill by Kathy Lenatra, and so it was great to hear where everything stands, and I think they are still kind of in a holding pattern for Chapter 70, at least of last week, and that was pretty much the update.
Awesome. Thank you, Katrina.
Thanks.
So we do have meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to accept the school committee meeting minutes of April 1st as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Katrina, seconded by Allison. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie. And I will turn it over to the superintendent.
The first thing under my report is for your consideration for a second read and approval of the 25-26 school year calendar. Since the first read 2 weeks ago or so, we've added the open house dates for the 5 schools, as well as played around a little bit with that January date. And so now Friday, January 2nd is a no school day, and students will return from the break on that Monday. It makes a little more sense. What that does do is place the 180th day of school as Friday, June 12th. And as you all know, because you've been doing this for so long, that we do have to schedule for 185 days, just in case there's 5 weather days, and that would be Monday, June 22nd. So I understand how unfavorable a Friday end day or a Monday end day is, but we will do our best to stick with what's on the calendar there. We've been pretty lucky the past couple of winters, so hopefully that luck stays the course.
Any questions on the school calendar? So can I get a motion to accept for second read and approval the 25-26 school year calendar as presented?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Sue, seconded by Katrina. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie.
The next thing under my report is for consideration for approval. This is an exciting time for the athletic department. I know Brian's here and he'll chime in if I miss something, but we have been approached by a couple of families about the potential of creating 2 new offerings for our student athletes, one being sailing and one being a dance team. What you have in your packet there is a copy of what the survey would look like for the sailing team. Obviously, the questions are the same, but they would say dance team. For the dance team, this is just to gauge interest, to see if there is a group of families and students that are interested in pursuing these offerings in the future year. Understanding that historically here in Pembroke, when we start something new, it is self-funded for the first 2 years. Before we take it on. So swimming, gymnastics, those are kind of the most recent sports that we've added here. So what we're looking for is your approval to survey both middle and high school families to see if there is interest in either of these offerings.
Is there any questions?
Just one quick question. I think this is great, but wondering if we should have a spot for parent names or parent name, just because it has the email, or is the student filling this out?
The parent will fill that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So maybe just adding that.
And we will be collecting emails, like we'll make sure that they know that we're collecting their emails and getting their
Perfect.
data.
Yeah.
And
Sounds good.
should we put in here that it would be the financial side of it for the first 2 years? Like,
Well, I
so
think
that-
Brian does outline that there is a financial responsibility associated with it. I have all the pages here.
The
but,
second page at the top.
I just don't know if it's worth, like, whether they think that just means the student sports fee, or they realize that this is.
No, we can put something in the
Yeah,
heading.
I
that
think
says-
just adding
Sure.
something to
Yep.
say that it's the first 2 years is self-funded, and what that generally has looked like for other sports,
Absolutely.
because it includes transportation, right?
All of it, yeah.
Ryan, pardon my ignorance, but where would we host a sailing team?
I was
Is
gonna
on
ask
the
that
lakes or one
question
of the
too.
oceans?
So that will certainly come through this data and this information. I know the one family that is interested in us having sailing, they have a relationship with the Maritime School in Duxbury.
Yeah.
So that's the school that they promoted, but all these questions go through that, right? How is that relationship just a family relationship? Is that something we can sustain when that family's gone?
Right.
There's a lot of deeper questions that we have to get answered to make sure that's sustainable for us.
Thank you.
Who else has, do you know what other, like, anybody else in Patriot League? Is it a Patriot League sport?
It's not an MIA sport.
Oh.
So some Patriot League schools do offer it. I know Hingham does. I know Duxbury does. There may be a few more, but it's not an MIA sport. So
Okay.
it's like cheerleading for us. It'd be an extracurricular essentially activity.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say I think it's great. I love the idea of a sailing team. Like, my daughter has friends that go to Duxbury that do that, and I think it's phenomenal. And the dances would be great.
I've heard great things about that, sailing, the Maritime School in Duxbury as well. I think they've expanded their programs a lot, so,
It's a beautiful
Yeah.
place. The facility's really nice.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other discussion on this? So can I get a motion to accept for approval the athletic survey as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sue, seconded by David. Sorry, it was close. Any further discussion? So hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it's unanimous, Natalie.
Under subcommittee updates, just start with policy sub. So in your packet, you have consideration for a first read for some revisions to policy KF. Policy KF is community and other use of school facilities. What policy sub was hoping to do with these revisions was to make it clear that these rules govern the grounds as well as the buildings themselves. And to clarify for folks that during school hours, using the school facilities, including the grounds, is prohibited. We talked about posting signs at each school that identify what the school hours are. Just like now, if you go out to the playground here at North, it says you can't use the playground during school hours because we're using the playground, which makes sense. So making sure that that is clear for all grounds, which would really prohibit folks from coming and walking their dog around the building while kids are out at recess. It would prohibit people from organizing on school property during school hours for various reasons. And we also wanted to articulate what the policy is when you're a visitor to our building, that you have to wear a visible badge when you're on school premises, including outdoor areas as well, so that folks here, students and staff, know that you have been cleared through the front office to be in the building.
So I have just a quick question. Did we look at any data from other schools and what they do?
Yeah, we looked at about 10 other schools, at least that I'm aware of. And Erin, you can speak to more if there were, but we looked at various schools, some in the area. I don't have the exact list, but I could send it to you. But all of them have different variations of the same thing, having grounds as well as the school building with prohibited times.
And I reached out to our MASC rep to ask to see kind of what other districts do, and this is what he recommended, that based on what he's seen, that they add ant grounds.
Okay. And do we happen to know off the top of our head, like what Duxbury, Hanover, Marshfield, like?
Yeah, I have the list, but I didn't bring it with me.
I think I have it. Let me just find it.
Of course, Allison.
But part of the reason that we are proposing this is, sometimes there have been instances where people have their dog, they're walking around and they're off leash even during the school day. Not all the time, not saying that's every single dog walker, but that's a safety concern for sure. And then also I know sometimes when there are differences of opinion or custody issues with parents, having a parent come to the playground and not knowing, maybe the teacher at recess is trying to figure out who it is, I think that makes it a little difficult to make a determination and poses a safety risk.
And some of this is a cultural change for us, for the town to kind of realize that, like for instance, I can't find what I was looking for, but at Havamock, they're doing gardening in the back right now, and they had to put signs up being like, clean up after your pets, because I think people are walking their pets in the garden area. And not that this would necessarily stop that from happening after school hours, but I do think there needs to be like a cultural kind of shift of the community use of some of, especially like where the kids physically are in the ground and not having pets. And it's hard when the schools aren't physically fenced in like other places.
Sure.
So this is, it's going to be a change of just kind of like, again, the culture around the schools. But we did look at, I thought I had it, but I don't
I'll circulate it around to you before it comes
Okay,
back.
yeah.
And
Yep.
it has like, we kind of took what we thought.
Pieces from a couple
yeah,
different ones.
and kind of put it as one, because,
And do we need to worry about like the parking lot or like, because like people come and dismiss their kids and whatever, do we need to put like a, I don't know, parameters around like what's allowed? I mean,
Yeah.
it almost seems like you can't even pull into the parking lot, so to speak.
well, but I mean, I mean, if you're coming to visit the school, right, like, that's where you go to get into the school. That's
Right.
not a,
We could clarify,
Closed.
though. We could say, this doesn't apply, it also doesn't apply after school, so we talked about that, but that would be really hard to monitor. And I think during the school day is more of the concern.
Absolutely.
But I do think we can put in there, if you're coming to a school event during the day that you've been invited to, or you're parking to pick up your child, that is not the case that we're
Considered,
talking
right.
about.
I can.
Just take a look at what other schools,
Yeah.
at the very least, do for that, so that
Yeah.
it's clear to parents that they can pick their child up if they need to, and whatever,
Yeah,
as long as they check in with the office.
absolutely.
yeah, because this obviously, like, learning lane and the sidewalks, those are public, we're not, restricting the use of those, and can't. This is, I think, mostly the fields and the drop-off areas and the
In the junior
playgrounds.
lot.
There is no such thing.
There's been no such thing for about 20 years, I'm just telling you. But it's alive and well. Are any other comments or discussion on this? So can I get a motion to accept for first read the revision of policy KF, community and other use of school facilities as presented?
So moved.
Second.
So motion by Sue, seconded by Allison. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous, Natalie.
The second thing that policy sub had taken a look at was, at your request, Patrick, taking a look at policy JJIB, and kind of memorializing our practice that athletes and coaches are not penalized for forfeiting a game if there's a student or an athlete of the opposite sex on the opposing team. That has been our practice here. You asked policy sub to take a look at what Dayton Rehoboth had in their policy. We met about it several times in policy sub, and where, I don't want to speak for them because I know Allison and Katrina are going to speak for themselves, but where we landed with a little bit of help from Brian as the athletic director, and kind of what other schools around us and in the Patriot League are doing, was a proposed revision to the athletic handbook. So what you have in your packet is what policy sub is proposing as a revision to general rules of participation. It's not the full athletic handbook, because handbooks don't come until much later, but just knowing that this is something that we would be planning on including, so.
So just quickly, before we dive into this conversation, I just want to say a couple of things for the committee. And I did bring this forward, I did ask for this to be done. For me, this is a safety issue, right? And I brought it up initially as a safety issue. I continue to believe it's a safety issue. I actually had a couple of people reach out to me over the past few days, some of which I happen to know very well, wonderful families here in Pembroke, to explain to me that they've had some concerns and their child has actually faced some backlash publicly. I just need, and I'm going to say it actually to the community, not just the people here, right? All our kids matter. All our kids are important. All our kids deserve empathy, they deserve care, and they deserve kindness. They learn that from us as adults, right? And so I believe really strongly that the conversation that we may have around this, as well as future conversations, are important to have on this topic, right? We talk about hard things to come to better places, to get to better decisions. And we may not all agree at times, and that's actually okay. We come to a better place when we debate things and we go back and forth. It's also okay to debate things, right? It's okay to talk about hard things, because the more we talk about stuff, the more I think our children and others can see us civilly debating and discussing and agreeing or disagreeing or what have you. Hard conversations are okay, but I cannot stress the importance of treating all of our kids, all of them, with empathy, kindness, and support. So I just want to make sure that we start it there. and then kind of talk through it. So I'll turn it over to you guys you guys have talked about this for a while.
Yeah.
You've clearly done a lot of work. You put
Yeah.
some really good language in for the handbook, but you obviously have a recommendation. I had asked for it in
Yeah.
the policy, and
Yeah.
you clearly have a recommendation on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually met, we met for the first time in October, met again in January, in March, and April. So we did take ample time to make sure we're looking at this from all aspects. And so, this was prompted by, there was a sports injury in Dighton Rehoboth that involved a transgender athlete in field hockey, and the concern was around the safety and having members of the opposite sex playing sports together. And the issue of fairness and things like that were also brought up. So in terms of what the policy proposal that was sent to the subcommittee, here's just the language from the one that was proposed. And this is just the section that was regarding the forfeiture section. No coach of a single-sex team shall be penalized by the district for forfeiting a match against an opposing team because such team includes athletes of the opposite sex. No student athlete on a single-sex team shall be penalized by the district in any manner for refusing to play in any match or any part thereof against an opposing team because that team includes a member of the opposite sex. For the purposes of this paragraph, a penalty includes, but is not limited to, loss of playing time or loss of starting status. And so in terms of what we looked at, we looked at our current practices of forfeiting games and what our practice is, and that is our practice that students and coaches can forfeit for any reason. And then we analyzed where policies versus discipline procedures lived, and we found that all of our student and coach discipline practices live in our handbooks and not our policy manuals. And so if we were to add it to the handbook, it would be the only student or coach discipline policy found in our policy manual. So it seemed like the best place to put that would be within the handbook, where the rest of those discipline practices lie. We looked at injury data for Pembroke. To my knowledge, no injuries in Pembroke recently have involved athletes of the opposite sex, at least no the contact injuries. And so it wasn't necessarily an issue that we were seeing recently in our local community. We asked Brian Phillips, our athletic director, to get feedback from other school districts in the area, and surrounding schools have not seen this as an issue or were considering this. And this was other schools in the Patriot League were not considering this as a policy. And that was it in November or December?
That was in November, then most recently in April, we
Okay.
resurfaced that
Perfect,
conversation.
yeah. So in November and April, so November of 2024 and April 2025. We gathered feedback from the Student Advisory Committee to the school committee, and they said they were kind of confused as to why this was being brought up, because from their perspective, the MIAA already has rules that address gender and sex differences, and they have sport-specific rules, such as in volleyball. Males are, in the back, they don't go in the starting line or the front line of the net. And so we looked at MIAA safety requirements versus recommended practices, as well as policy changes in the last 5 years. On further research about the DR injury, I found that the injury could have been more likely due to a lack of comprehensive safety gear, not having a protective corner mask, not necessarily the athlete's sex. There's no way to know if the athlete's sex was the cause, but what we do know is that since that time, the National Federation of High School Associations, NFHS, has put in a recommendation that students playing these corner plays do wear a full head mask or head safety equipment. And so I believe the MIAA has also allowed for student athletes to wear this, and there's no penalty as long as you do so within 25 yards of the corner. So you do have to take it off after that 25-yard mark. And one other piece is that those corner plays are amongst the most dangerous in field hockey, and that is why there is a recommendation for additional safety equipment. So getting to our proposed solutions, one is to maintain our current policy under JJIB. And two, because discipline practices for Pembroke Public School students and coaches are found within our student handbooks, not formal policy, the policy subcommittee is proposing that we add no penalties to apply for forfeiting games for safety reasons. Here is the proposed change for the athletic handbook. Participation in athletics is governed by policy JJIB. In the Pembroke Public School Committee Policy Manual, no student athlete or coach shall be penalized by the district in any manner for forfeiting an athletic contest against an opposing team for safety reasons. Safety reasons may include, but are not limited to, issues with the facility, playing field or surface, athletes of the opposite sex on the opposing team, injury, illness, or egregious conduct by athletes or fans. And to that point, I believe some of the only instances that we did forfeit games was actually due to egregious conduct with athletes or fans in football and hockey games, from what I understand. So rather than using a single identity marker as the basis for when we do and do not allow our student athletes to forfeit games without consequence, we think that students and coaches should be able to forfeit a game for any reason related to safety. In addition to that, I have some other recommendations to consider consider mandatory use of corner masks during penalty corners in field hockey specifically. But I would love to hear more from and gather more data on that. To collect ongoing feedback from coaches and players and review fall data for our sports, because I think there was a policy change that we need a full year to look at for field hockey. And also monitor Pembroke athletic data for sports with the highest rates of contact-related injuries in K through 12 settings, which include football, wrestling, ice hockey, lacrosse, basketball, and soccer, as well as field hockey. And I think the other piece that I want to mention, we haven't necessarily had any injuries from our co-ed sports that were contact-based. However, we have had serious mental health challenges experienced by our youth, including trans kids. And I think we heard about the seriousness of that issue during the discussion around banning flags last January from some of our Pembroke students and families. So I want us to consider our local community when thinking about these changes. And so that's part of the reason that we are moving forward with including all areas of safety in the proposed language for the handbook.
Well, thank you, and thank you guys for the amount of research you did on this. I think that's great. Comments, thoughts on what they're proposing?
Well, first of all, yes, thank you very much for all the research you both did. I appreciate everything that you have to say, and while I think like putting it in the handbook, absolutely. But in addition to that, I really don't see any harm in putting it in the policy. And I want to sort of make this clear. This is not preventing someone of the opposite sex of participating in the sport. This is allowing an opt-out if someone doesn't feel safe. And that's a big difference. And so I don't see this as something against the trans community or, this is just safety. And if it's okay, I'd like to make a motion. Can I make a motion?
Can you hold your motion
Yeah.
until we all just have a chance to speak?
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
I'll be happy to go to you first.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Can I respond to that, or should I wait until everybody has a chance to speak?
I just want to see if David, and then I'm happy to let you respond.
No, I just wanted, and Brian can very clarify this. If we choose to forfeit a game, hypothetically, football, basketball, hockey, whatever, the MIAA counts that technically as a loss, and if you get in one of those situations where you have to be over 500, under 500, that could work against. I just want parents to be aware of this if I'm correct.
Yeah, so that would go, in the new tournament rankings, the statewide tournament, that goes in as a loss, and how that is impacted, so the margin of victory is a massive data point in the tournament rankings.
Yep.
So our opponent would get the maximum value of victory for that forfeiture. We would get negative value, they would get that positive value.
Okay.
Does our policy have anything to do with that? Like, does that make a change? If we have a policy, would that mean that it doesn't count against us, or does it count
No.
against us anyway?
That's our policy, not the MIA's.
Right, I
Yeah,
just wanted to clarify that
This is
point.
just about, what do we do as a town to keep our kids safe? So regardless of what the MIAA is doing, I think it's important that we keep our kids safe and we allow them the opportunity to be safe and allow the coaches an opt-out if they feel it's needed. That doesn't mean they're going to, and it gives them the option to continue on. It's just if they see, a biological male on an all-female team on the other side that's like 2 feet taller and it's field hockey and maybe the girls don't feel safe, like it's an opt-out without being penalized from our end. regardless of what the MIAA does.
So you said that you wanted to
Oh, yeah,
respond to
just
something?
to say, so something that Sue had said, I apologize, I lost it, around putting it in the policy manual. So again, it would be the only student and coach discipline policy in our policy manual. The rest of them are in the student athletic handbook. So we don't have any discipline practices in our policy manual. So that's part of the reason we proposed that it would go in our handbook, because I'm going by what is relevant in the context of Pembroke, not Dighton Rehoboth.
Yeah, but sure, which is fair, but it's not unheard of because Dighton Rehoboth has done it successfully without any issues, so.
So, hold on, because Allison hasn't had a chance. Did you
Well, I
wanna-
was just gonna say that, I feel like this is our practice, we're putting our practice into words, putting it on paper. None of this is changing anything of how we do anything. We do protect our students, we are, protecting and safe and, practice all of that. Based on everything we looked at, based on the recommendations from the superintendent and,
Students.
This is the place to put it. I don't, it's from talking with students and what I know from parents and students read the handbooks because that's what they go to. I would be super curious if we just told a kid, hey, could you find policy JJIB and tell us about it? They're not going to know that. They're going to know the handbook.
That is true.
So this is to me, it's just where it goes. Like, it's not changing anything. We should put it here. This is the most visible. It's already what we do.
So I purposely wanted to give everyone a chance to speak about this. I spoke about it when I asked you guys to take this and consider it. I will say, I think you guys have done an outstanding job, by the way, so thank you both. There's a couple of things here, right? I think, candidly, we have an executive order right now that was signed by the president that made it clear that you actually can't commingle genders on a team. Whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, I'm not getting into the political nature of that. But we sat around this table a year ago talking about Title IX, and President Biden had signed an executive order on Title IX that had very specific language. In that language, then we had to adjust our policy and review our policy based on that language of that executive order. I don't see this candidly as being a whole lot different. We actually did not have on the agenda talking about either changing policy or adjusting policy around allowing biological men to play in female sports. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because it wasn't on the agenda. It would be an open meeting law violation. But I would ask that you guys consider that in the next session. Having this here, though, this specific item here, was for me a safety issue, right? And I believe that we do have a duty and an obligation to take a step on a safety issue. We had the young woman in Dighton Rehoboth who was seriously injured, and it's clear that the MIAA must be concerned about it because they're now coming out talking about having face guards and face protection and everything else about it. But it's not just that one sport, right? I also understand that we're doing what candidly the Commonwealth says we have to do in saying if there is not a biological male sport, that you have to allow biological males to play on the female team and in the female sport. Again, we can agree or we can disagree. That is not what this topic is ultimately going to be about tonight. I personally will tell you my feeling on that is that shouldn't happen, again, for safety reasons. In a second. You could have somebody my size who plays football, who then turns around because there isn't a sport, whether it be volleyball or field hockey or anything else, playing, and that is very, very different from a force component, from a strength component, and what have you. That's what worries me, right? So it is not about anything other than that piece of it. The other thing is on discipline. I actually think that what this is doing is providing a guide. I actually think being in the handbook is 100% the right starting point, right? Because what it tells is the coaches and everyone else can turn it around, show a parent, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. I think that makes sense. I do think it should be codified in a policy, just given where we are, because it's not about necessarily just discipline. It's literally saying, we as a district believe that it is okay for you to take this step if you need to take it. And in these types of environments and charged environments, giving the coach that level of comfort in knowing that they can take that step and it's going to be okay, and it's more than just a handbook, but it is a policy of this district, I do think is an important step. But that's, again, that's my feeling.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the part I was going to say is the Massachusetts law is like, it's older than I am. I mean, this has been,
agreed.
it's really, this is like,
1979.
Yeah, so it's been this, the standard, and it was for really, good reason to allow, to help bring girls and women into the, the ability to play and not be, sidelined. So I just think that we're already doing the right things. Putting it into writing makes it clear to everybody, that this is what we already are doing, and if safety is the main concern, then I think there's a lot of other ways we can be increasing the safety that doesn't have to do with the policy.
I'm all for putting it in the handbook. I think it's 100% the right thing to do. I would take it another step further, but that's just my feeling.
One piece I just wanted to mention in regards to Title IX. So while we had a discussion about it in relation to looking at the executive order from the Biden administration, the only piece that we added in there that wasn't in Mass General Law was actually having a space for pregnant students to be able to feed their child with a lactation. So we didn't necessarily, in the end, take it from Title IX, the executive order. We took it primarily from Massachusetts general law.
But we spent multiple meetings to get to that point. Initially, we were going to change
And we
a
also
lot
added
of the
links
language when
so
we
that
did
people
that.
could get back to Title,
Right.
Which had
links
been
to the Title
since
IX, which we didn't have before, so that people could
Yeah.
see what the actual Title IX law said.
My point is, I want us to treat it all the same, right? All laws, all executive orders, regardless of who's sitting behind the desk, we just have to treat on equal footing is my point. You wanted to make a motion?
I do.
Because we do have the
Yep.
joint
I'd like to make a motion to amend policy JJIB to include the following language. No coach of a single-sex team shall be penalized by the district for forfeiting a match against an opposing team because such team includes, I can't even see, athletes of the opposite sex. And also, no student athlete on a single-sex team shall be penalized by the district in any manner for refusing to play in a match or any part thereof against an opposing team because that team includes a member of the opposite sex. For purposes of this paragraph, a penalty includes, but is not limited to, loss of playing time or loss of starting status.
So just point of clarification, does that mean you're not taking the recommendation of the policy subcommittee?
Well, I'm,
Only one safety reason?
No, so hold on, we're going to debate this in a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it has to get a second. So motion made by Sue, is there a second? So I'm going to second it for discussion. So I had the same question, so your language, Sue, which I appreciate actually immensely, but it only deals with one item. The language they have here actually calls out the same-sex component, but it also calls out, which I really appreciate, I think it's a good thing, the facility, playing field surface, illness, or egregious contact by athletes or fans.
should we include that in
I
the
actually
policy?
think, well, what I would ask us to do is go with the language I think that the policy subcommittee came up with, because it includes that, but it also includes a whole bunch of other things, and I would ask that be put in the policy, not just the handbook.
Sure.
Are we following policy
Recommendations?
can we do this? Like,
Confused.
I thought like the policy is that policy subcommittee makes the recommendations for policy.
Right.
And we aren't recommending that?
You're
Make
recommending-
this, so isn't like BG something? Do we
No.
suspend rules on?
So we're not suspending the rules, so the,
I'm
so,
just-
no, 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 no.
this
So
is a-
it's, I'm glad you're asking the question, actually. It's a good question, because we had this come up in the last year. I promise the selectmen and the advisory committee, we will get to. So what that policy says is policy is made in policy sub, and it is debated in policy sub. And policy sub can do three things. They can bring it forward with a recommendation. Well, actually, four things. They can bring it forward with a recommendation of, here's what we believe should be in the policy. They can bring it forward with a recommendation of, we don't believe this should be in the policy, or we believe what was asked for should be shifted or changed to look like this. They can take no action at all, at which point something would die in the policy subcommittee, and it would go no further. Or they can bring to the committee, we couldn't reach a discussion, we couldn't reach a decision, so we're going to bring it to the committee to decide. I asked you guys, so your recommendation is to not do anything with the policy. That's the recommendation the policy sub is bringing forward. Totally a legitimate thing to bring forward. The committee can debate that, though. That is a debatable item at that point. Policy subcommittee has brought forth a recommendation to make no change to the policy, but take this language and put it in the handbook. If you could have also said, we are recommending making this change and putting this in the policy, and the committee could have voted against that. So the committee at that point, once the recommendation is brought forward, has every right to debate and then vote on what they believe should be in the policy.
But just also, that's not on the agenda, though. JJIB is not
It's not, yeah.
on the agenda for
Yeah,
discussion.
it actually just talks about the handbook revision, so.
Well, it's listed under policy.
Policy subcommittee?
It's listed, if you look at the agenda, it's listed under policy subcommittee updates.
But that's not a vote.
For handbook revision.
Yeah, handbook revision.
Because we're not voting on this because we're going to do it all as one, right? Like, isn't
It's
it?
the athletic handbook,
Yeah,
yes.
later.
So we're not even voting on including this?
Because I didn't give you the whole handbook yet.
No, but including this in the handbook when you,
I wasn't thinking you had to, just because it wasn't a full revision of the handbook.
no, that's right. So here's what I'm going to do, because I don't want to take a vote like this and then have the vote questioned. So I'm going to suspend discussion on this topic until May 6th, right? At which point on May 6th, because we just debated all of this, we will come back and there will be explicitly a vote on the policy number and to make a potential revision to the policy number on the agenda. Okay, and then that way it is very clear, we're not doing anything backroom. I do not want to do that. Candidly, I'm not even sure it's going to pass. But I just want to be very clear that of what we're doing and why we're doing it and that type of thing. We'll add it to the agenda on May 6th. We may end up with a longer meeting or a shorter meeting at this point. I don't know. I will not be taking public comment at that point, right? We had this handbook language on the agenda. We were able to take public comment here. I'm not rallying sides or anything else and turning this into something it doesn't need to be, but we'll just make it clear. I think it's a fair call out on the vote, and we'll put it on the agenda for the 6th.
If I can say something, I don't think we can just not let people discuss it, because JJIB is not on the agenda today, so
We need to give
we,
the public
yeah,
the
they have.
opportunity to speak.
So I hear you, right? And I will consider that as we come into the meeting.
Point of order, just because we had a motion and a second.
I'm suspending
Suspending,
discussion.
okay, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that
Yeah.
covers us, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, though, David. I do appreciate it. I'm not going to adjourn yet, just in case.
Because you didn't do
right?
track, right?
What do you mean?
So our
to the
meetings
track?
You didn't do boys.
Oh, right, yeah, no, they're not even here yet. Sorry, I might the track. We're not voting on the
And we
track.
also have a meeting.
So I would like to invite members of the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee to come up to the table.
Select board.
Isn't that what I
Do
said?
you want to sort of size?
I just put out a
Oh,
bunch of
okay.
seats. I don't care what. Brian's moving from the table because he doesn't get a seat anymore.
Thanks, Brian. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Hey, John. Good to see you. Oh, there you go. That's the kid.
I'll tell you.
Oh, which one?
Oh, Rich is not.
Hey, Bill. Hi, Bill. Hi, sir. Dan, good to see you. The other two I saw last night.
So,
Nice to see you.
See you guys.
so I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, we're a little late here. So it's 7:15. I'm going to call the joint meeting with the Select Board and the Advisory Committee on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025 to order. I would ask each of the chairs of their respective boards to call their boards to order.
Order the advisory committee meeting for Tuesday, April 15th, joint meeting with Board of Selectmen and School Committee.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the town meeting for April 15th.
Thank you, Tracy. So thank you guys for coming. We did this, if you all recall, about a year ago. We got really good feedback that sort of said this was kind of a great way to share thoughts, ideas, get questions asked, sort of that type of thing. And so we thought we would do it again this year, potentially make this an annual event. I know the superintendent has her fiscal year admin recommended budget to present to all of you. She did present that in an open session 2 weeks ago and presented it to the committee. But Bill, if you don't mind, I was going to ask you to just maybe open up about, the town budget, the process of the town budget, where we ended up, we are in balance, sort of all that stuff to just set the stage, if that's okay.
Sure. So, just to give an overview, I'm looking around the room, I think most people may have an understanding, but not everyone does at home for sure.
Yep.
We start the town budget process at the end of September. We send it out to all the department heads. We build our revenue stream. The town accountant and myself review the revenue stream, and that process with revenue, we set it so we know what our expectations are for revenue, but we adjust it because there's a lot of unknown factors through even today with revenue. We have set revenue solid. In Massachusetts, we have no choice but to have a balanced budget. The only item that a municipal government can deficit spend on is snow and ice. Everything else must be part of a balanced budget. Not that we don't budget for snow and ice, we do, but you can deficit spend for that. As of today, we are balanced. It took a lot of cuts from requests on the town side, and I know the same situation with the schools. I talk to the superintendent on a regular basis. And I just want to, thank schools, school committee, advisory, select board, and all of the department heads. I know it is a very, very difficult year and a very trying year to get there. We are there, fortunately. I just want to, lay it on the table that it's going to be a struggle next year also. And I think it's important that we recognize that as a community. I have been pleading with everybody when it comes to new growth, please don't shut that down. Under Proposition 2.5, communities survive on new growth. We have some things coming up on the town meeting warrant that will bring us new growth, and I think that's very important. It will help us next year to offset what is looking like a deficit.
Okay, great, thank you, appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent. This should be an interactive discussion, right? So is the superintendent's going through the slides or what have you? If you have a question, just ask. We will, hopefully we'll answer some of them as we go through. But if you have questions as the data is being presented, by all means, just ask. You don't have to be overly formal. We've all known each other too many years at this point.
So again, I'm just going to go through the slides that I presented 2 weeks ago for the admin recommended budget. What you have in your packets is the same as what's on the screen. If it will change, it probably won't. I think Bill's in the way. Mary Beth, do you want to be the clicker? I think it's just the angle.
Thank you.
I think it should work okay. Do you want to be this instead? Oh, timed out.
Well,
I
look,
love this.
at this point,
They're the same
everyone
size.
around the table has a copy of the
Yep.
slides. These slides are up on our website. They were presented a couple weeks ago, so
Yep, they're the same size. Oh, perfect.
that's because I was moving on.
So just an overview, I'm going to share a little bit of the historical budget information, a review of our FY26 maintenance of effort budget, talk about where we landed administratively with our recommendations, and then the timeline and next steps. So the first few slides there give you some historical funding information for the schools in the town. There's about 15 years worth of history there. One of our favorite things to point out is the dismal growth in Chapter 70 year over year. So from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 26, we are expecting just over 1.28% growth in Chapter 70. Again, not anything to really write home about. As you can see from the history there aren't any great years other than in 2011 where we had 4.32% increase. It also shows there what portion the school is of the town budget, with one caveat. We do not budget for health insurance and pension costs on our side. So this is truly just the school department budget. Those costs are carried on the town side. So obviously, we offer the same health insurance packages to school employees as we do to town employees. And there are a number of positions here that pay into the Plymouth County pension system, as opposed to our biggest retirement system on the school side, which is Mass Teachers. So there's some pension liability associated with the schools as well that's budgeted on the town side. One of the data points that we like to look at is how we're spending our dollars, both in district and for all students. So the graph on the left there is what the per pupil expenditure for our in-district students in Pembroke has been for the past 15 years or so, 10 to 15 years. The orange line is the state average, the blue line is Pembroke Public Schools. Obviously, we are spending less than the state, but the degree of the curve is pretty similar to where the state has been. The graph on the right shows the spending for all students, and I'd just like to give a little bit of an aside when we look at these two things. So the spending for all students includes out-of-district special education placements, and so in a community like Pembroke, you may have one or two students that move in over the course of a school year or even 2 school years, and the tuition associated with those students could be $500,000. So I think when you're looking at how much we're spending on students, the best way to look at it is how much you're spending on your in-district students, because the out-of-district student population can vary so greatly from community to community. So when we look at it, we look mostly at the in-district piece.
So can we just pause there? Did everyone understand that? Because it's not necessarily the most straightforward component. Yes, I see a lot of heads nodding. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. For fun, we like to compare ourselves. We compare ourselves to what others around us are spending. So here you see on this chart our per pupil expenditure for fiscal year 23. That is the last audited end of year pupil and financial report that's available. So for fiscal year 23, you can see how Pembroke spent in each of the categories listed above versus what other communities around here spent in those same categories. When we met together jointly last year, we talked about instructional leadership being an area of concern on our expenditure versus that of surrounding communities. We have adjusted how we're reporting our content supervisors on the end of the year report, but you won't see that until the fiscal year 24 per pupil. So when we do this again next year, you'll see that our instructional leadership will definitely shift downwards, because we are capturing the portion of those positions that are actually teaching students. So they are not full-time administrators. They do teach for a portion of their days as well.
So I'm just kind of repeating back, make sure I understand, because I remember we did talk about the instructional leadership, administrative, instructional leadership, et cetera. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're going to kind of you're going to tease out the amount. So you might have a teacher, or you might have a content supervisor who's paid X.
Sure.
If they teach students 50% of the time, you're going to tease out 50%.
50% would go to teaching, 50% would go to
That
admin.
that makes good sense.
Yeah. So as much fun as it is to compare ourselves to those around us, what is a better comparison is like districts. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education does give us a list of DART schools, so schools and communities that are socioeconomically, population-wise similar to Pembroke. Those are listed below. It's it's better to look at how we're spending versus those communities because they're identified as like communities, not just near communities. So when looking at our per pupil expenditures to see if there's something that really stands out in any one of the categories, looking at comparable districts as defined by DART schools in the Department of Elementary Secondary Education is a better way for us to make sure that we're not out of line with any of our spending. You'll see there PD is consistently low here in Pembroke. We are fortunate enough to write a whole bunch of grants and do as much grant funding as we can for professional development for staff. So our expenditure for PD is low because we do offset it with grant funding. I'm happy to say that our operations and maintenance has gone up a little bit. There have been years past where we have been the lowest in the comparable districts, but as our buildings are aging, I've talked about this a little bit before, every single one of our 5 school buildings underwent a major renovation or remodel between 1998 and 2001. So every single toilet, every single sink is the same age across the district. So we're starting to see some of that replacement needing to happen and work on some of our mechanical systems. So that cost has gone up a little bit. The other thing that's important to point out is the benefits and fixed costs. Though Pembroke is a 75-25 health insurance community, not all of these communities are. So you can see in some of the districts there's a variation between the benefits cost, and that's because their premiums are either 90-10, which are very few and rare, but there's a couple here that are 50-50 employee and employer pay on health insurance. So for our fiscal year 26 admin recommended budget, we started with where we were in November of 24. So in November of 2024, I presented our maintenance of effort budget. So maintenance of effort is doing everything we're doing this year, rolling it forward at next year's prices. So taking into account our transportation increases, tuition increases, any known collective bargaining increases, all of that is included in our maintenance of effort. So on that day in November, we were at $40,910,097. We don't have any required additions into our fiscal year 26 budget. There have been a couple years in the past where we've had to add a special education teacher or a paraprofessional based off of student need, or an English language learner teacher. We don't have any required additions for compliance purposes, but we do have a handful of level 1 priorities that have been identified through the budget process, and I'll go through those on another slide or two. Those are the total of about $415,000, which brings our total budget to $41,325,000. We take a series of adjustments each year on our budget. One of those adjustments is a transportation revolving account offset. So as many of you as parents of secondary students know, we do charge a fee for bus passes. We do generate anywhere from $85,000 to $110,000 in fees for bus passes. So each year we do take $100,000 out of the revolving account and offset the part of the transportation expense on our budget. But just to clarify, transportation of regular ed students in the district costs close to $2 million. So the fee that we collect in no way, shape, or form offsets the full cost associated with transportation, but it does help defray some of the cost. Each year for the past 6 years, we have been able to participate in special education tuition pre-buy. That is the one of the only things that the state allows you to pre-purchase, meaning I can use fiscal year $25 to purchase tuitions that students will access in fiscal year 26. The rules associated with that purchase are that I can purchase a full year of a collaborative tuition or a quarter of a private tuition. So we have identified about $600,000 in our fiscal year 25 budget that we would use to purchase tuition for next year, which then allows us to lower that tuition liability in fiscal year 26. As Bill alluded to, he and I have been meeting quite frequently this budget cycle. We have a capital item on the warrant for some curricular materials similar to what we had done last year. Last year, we funded our Envision Math purchase through a capital item, and there's items that we've identified for a similar funding for this spring's warrant as well. So we have about $800,000 in adjustments, which brings our budget down to $40,525,000. We're still solving for a pretty big gap there over what our current budget is of the $38 million. So every year for the past 10 years, we have taken some version of enrollment-driven reductions. Those are outlined both in your appendix, and I think I gave you all a spreadsheet in a font that is legible as opposed to what's in the appendix. I'm just outlining what those reductions have been in the past, but I'll go through what we're proposing for this fiscal year on slide 11. We had a wonderful fee discussion at our April 1st meeting of the school committee, and the school committee voted to raise fees that would amount to about $63,500 of increased revenue. The Chapter 70 number for the governor's budget was $75 a student. Bill and I talked at length about, is that the right number to include? I think we're both feeling like that would be the floor, and we're hoping the ceiling is much higher. So we are including the $75 a student. And then, of course, as has happened in years past, there's obviously an increase to the town, from the town, for a contribution to our budget.
If that number, the Chapter 70 number actually does come in higher than $75, what happens? Because it would mean that more funds were coming. Chapter 70 money is usually directed to education. Well, what would happen? What's the plan around that?
How it has worked in the past is if the number comes in higher than what we are anticipating, Bill has been great to work with on the Chapter 70 piece, and there's been an amendment made to the budget at town meeting.
The only caveat to that is if we get a huge hit on one of the other education items on our,
You'd want it to
it
balance
will
out.
offset slightly.
Sure.
But she's 100%
Yep,
correct.
okay.
So after all of that, we are balanced on our side. We actually have about 1,900 extra, but again, there's no
Point out,
percentage goal.
I just want to point out, because I asked the question and then we jumped, because I think it's important for people to know, the town contribution also increased by $1,242,000, right? So the town is investing in education, and I think that's important for folks to know and understand, and that's what gets us to the
Right, so that,
$1,900
yes,
overage.
so that number, all of those revenues with the adjustments, the reductions, and the additions that I have outlined, brings us to the town manager's recommended budget of $40,005,050 that has been presented publicly several times. So I want to talk a little bit about what we discussed administratively and at the committee here as far as what we were looking to add for fiscal year '26. This is the first time in a long time that we've actually had level 1 admin priorities, that we've been able to reinvest some of the funds associated with some of the enrollment reductions into expanding our programs and our offerings for students. So in a couple of the budget presentations that took place between January and March, we talked about a behavioral social emotional program. I'm really starting that at the elementary level. Havemock Elementary School does house our district-wide programs, so that would make the most sense for that to be located at Havemock. There's obviously a tremendous amount of support needed in a program like that. What we are proposing for year 1 is really bare bones support, a teacher and a registered behavior technician and RBT. Associated with that program, we would draw on the current staffing there as far as the social worker, some of the school psychologist pieces, and any additional paraprofessional support that's needed in that classroom. The hope is that creating that program at Havemock in subsequent budget years will allow us to not send a student or two out of district, or even bring a student or two that is out of district back into district. So after the first year, there'd be some cost savings moving forward. For us, it also does open the opportunity to potentially tuition in students from other districts. Once we have a program for families to come and look at, then we can talk about offering that as a placement for other students.
I have 3 questions on that
Awesome.
particular program. Maybe not awesome. Do you have a sense of current students, just not even the right number, just a sense of about how many you would move into that from our
Sure,
district?
so I think we have 4 or 5 right now, looking at our population, not just at Havemock, but at our other 2 elementary schools.
Yeah.
There's about 4 or 5 that would be off the bat fits for this program. Obviously, we have to take a look at the age span of students. We can't have
Yeah.
students that are more than 48 months age-wise separated. We have a student that is currently out of district that would definitely be a good fit for that program, but we want to have a program to show.
Yeah.
It's hard for parents to conceptualize without seeing. So that's possible that a move back to district could even happen mid-school year as well.
Okay, and then the other question was about the RBT, because that is just a higher level pair that has 40 hours of ABA training and a certification, but I'm assuming they still only work the 26.6 weeks, and they're not a 7-hour day employee?
Paraprofessionals here in the district, which in RBT, as you just said, is
Yeah.
a para with a little bit more training. They work 35 hours a week, and they
Yeah.
work the 40 weeks of school. So,
Not 20, okay, so
yeah.
they're the 40.
So it
okay,
comes out to be just
phew.
under like $33 an hour or so,
Okay.
which is definitely in line with kind of more than what our para scale is, to recognize the fact that there's additional training that goes along with that piece as well.
For reference, in private RBT business, $21 to $23 an hour.
Yeah, and then you all charge us like $75 an hour when you send them our way.
I know. That's why I'm glad you're getting your own in-district VCBA.
Are you good with that one?
Yes.
Okay.
But just to be fair, right, because you did bring up the differential.
Yeah.
If you looked at what surrounding schools are paying.
Yes,
If
it's
you like,
$30.
so we've done,
Yeah.
in the last couple of months, we've done an extensive review of what other schools and what other surrounding communities, as well as those DART schools, those like finance communities to us, are paying teachers, paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers to the extent we can, and custodians, right? And we've done that for a lot of reasons, right? If we advertise this for $21 to $23 an hour, you might as well
Right,
just
right.
not have the role, because you're just not going to get anyone. It's just not where those are. So I just want to make sure that that was really clear. We're not just going out and saying, oh, let's pay a whole bunch more than we actually have to. We've done a significant amount of research to figure out where the market is, both around us and in like communities.
You're right about that for the districts, yeah. And then the BCBA you have to get because they're a dependent practitioner.
Right, we have to have a BCBA on staff in order to have an RBT here.
Does everybody know what a BCBA is? I didn't-
Board Certified Behavior Analyst. And to the point that Sandy and I were just making, in order to have a registered behavior technician on site, they have to work under a licensed BCBA. So you do have to have both.
Jess,
positions.
what does a BCBA do?
So they are looking at supporting the functions of behavior. So they're doing functional behavioral assessments, they're guiding staff, they're collecting data, creating behavior plans in order for an RBT to then implement those with students.
So BCBA is doing the higher level work, RBT is doing on the ground work with the student. The next piece that we are adding is a .4 business teacher at Pembroke High School. So currently we have a full-time business teacher and a part-time business teacher at Pembroke High School. The part-time business teacher is a .6 pathways coordinator and teaches 2 business electives at Pembroke High School. Based off of the number of students that we have in our pathways at the high school and managing those outplacements, internships, and all of the other amazing things that Mary Ellen Gates does with those students. I know she's presented at the chamber, she's pretty much a traveling circus talking about the pathways. Moving into next year, we need to create her position as the coordinator would be full-time, but we don't want to necessarily eliminate those additional business electives at the high school because they are electives that a lot of our students choose. So we would be adding a .4 business teacher. We made the point about the BCBA, that would be 1 for the district, though I think during both the elementary presentation, the secondary presentations, and student services, we talked about having 1 for every building. We are going to start with 1 and share it across all buildings. And see, the goal really there is to build the teacher toolbox, to really have somebody on site that folks can go to and that can work directly with staff so that we can manage better in our classrooms. Again, we recognize that what education looks like today for our students and our teachers looks vastly different than it looked even 5 to 10 years ago, and really making sure that we have the supports in place so that our teachers feel supported in dealing with behaviors in their classrooms as well as growing their own skill sets. Coordinator of counseling, so it was in 2017 that we eliminated the director of guidance position at Pembroke High School. This is not replacing the director of guidance. This is really taking a pre-K through 12 look at counseling and behavioral health. We are fortunate enough to be a recipient of the behavioral health grant that the state puts out. This is why that position is half funded by grant funding and half funded by our operating budget. Over the past 10 years, the committee has really prioritized social and emotional health of students. We have a full-time social worker in every one of our buildings, with 2 at our high school. We have full-time school psychologists. We're looking at, obviously you see here, BCBAs, RBTs, and having somebody that's looking at that from with a pre-K through 12 lens for consistency is important. In addition, during our technology presentation, Mike Tinker talked a lot about looking at some of the things that we're currently doing and is there a better, more efficient and effective way to do that. And he proposed a series of managed services. So we are a very small and mighty tech department here in Pembroke. We're just slightly bigger than the tech department at the high school, at Town Hall. I think you guys have 0 and we have 3. But we have...
And neither is adequate.
We have, I think, a little over 3,800 devices here that are being managed on our network. We run 3 separate networks. All of that is falling to one director of technology, one network admin, and really one network tech. So taking a look at some of those pieces associated with technology and really outsourcing the management of them.
Question.
Yep.
You guys are probably aware, but at the town level, certainly, we've been trying to find ways to enhance our IT capabilities, whether it's regionalizing it within a town or something. And I know that at the school level, like a reason why we can't just simply combine them is because at the school side, you need to have, there's not only a little bit more restrictions to it, but it's a little bit broader in quality in terms of what you guys need to do versus what we need to do there. It's simpler in the town level than what you guys have to do on that. Have there been any discussions about how, instead of going that direction on the town side and adding that administrative overhead of managers and so on and so forth, because your needs are greater and more complicated, maybe combining them with the town, and then that might make it easier to justify adding more line level people, adding more capacity for the ability to handle the load while still maintaining maybe the more administrative hierarchy itself. So that could reduce costs while still combining things and it's
Sure,
simpler
there's
on the town
3
side.
positions that Bill and I talk a lot about, make sense for sharing: facilities director, information technology director, and human resources. Neither of us has those positions standalone. Here in the school district, we have a director of instructional technology. The focus of their job is working with teachers to integrate technology into the classroom. There is not an information technology director here. It's a shift from our structure about five years ago. We shifted away from informational technology and into instructional technology, but I think we're absolutely in a place where it makes sense to share the service, because it would really be duplication of efforts for us to have one and for you to have one, and that would, I think, free up the ability for us to have some more boots on the ground, kind of lower level staff available for network tech kind of pieces, like help me with my printer or do whatever else. We've also tapped into the abundant free labor at Pembroke High School, so we do have a genius bar over there, and what those kids are able to do is amazing. If you walk in the room, you would be horrified by the amount of Chromebook pieces that are everywhere, but they have, I think, over 200 devices fixed themselves on site this school year. They are, it's great free labor.
We love free labor.
Yep.
But I think your point,
Yeah.
Stephen, trying
Shared
to
services.
figure out how to shared service or create a shared services model is the right way to be able to expand those offerings. Yeah.
We talked at the elementary presentation as well as at the teaching and learning budget presentation about math interventionists. Obviously, the goal would be to have one at every building, but having one at each building would allow some level of intervention for our teachers. So when teachers have a concern regarding students' performance in math, for example, they bring that student to an IST, which is an instructional support team meeting, where folks from the building talk about what are the interventions that are happening in the classroom, what does that student need, what else can we do. At this point, we don't have a lot of interventions outside the classroom for our elementary teachers, so this would allow us some level of intervention, similar to the reading specialists, which you all have added one at each elementary school about 3 years ago. So it starts on that. We obviously would like to offer some more opportunities for students at Pembroke High School. We have a great student body that has great, vast interests. And so adding some funding to the co-curricular stipend lines there. So anytime a student group is interested in starting a club, we do ask that they find an adult volunteer to be the advisor for the club for the first year or two, in hopes that then the club has some sustainability, and then that becomes one of the clubs that are funded through the extracurricular line. But the student interests have outpaced the growth of the line for those stipends, so we're asking to increase that as well. I think at the table you have 2 free advisors here for 2 different clubs at Pembroke High School.
I also just want to point out, because Mike Tropiano will tell me I'm remiss if I don't. Mr. Tropiano used to remind us when we were talking about things like that, it is far better at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon to see kids in our school buildings, in clubs, in extracurricular activities, in sports, than hanging out in the middle of town on the street corner doing whatever. So I think the more we can offer kids after school and the more opportunities, the better it is for kids, the better it is for the town, and I think the better it is for future citizenship.
So even though we're moving forward at just over 415,000 of level 1 priorities, there was a whole host of other things that we discussed at length during the 11 budget presentations that didn't quite make it to a level 1. Those are listed on the next 2 slides in no particular order. I don't like anyone to feel like something has a better chance than something else. But I think it is important to point out that when we had our meeting with our state representatives and Senator Fernandez, they talked about, is there any items that they could help us with for one-time funds in the form of pothole grants. Not super sure where that name comes from, but we did submit a request to them for 3 separate pothole grants, one to help with some of the funding towards the behavioral program, one to help with some of the funding towards technology, and one to help with some of the capital needs associated with our pathways at the high school. If that funding does come in, we would look at these level 2 and 3 and beyond and see if there's something else there that we'd be interested in adding into the budget.
Could I ask what the Chromebook and the access points that you have on there, and you have that, I can kind of see, we'll look into for year end, is that what it says out there? Okay. I remember last year you were saying it's about 3 years useful life for the access point, and then also that the Chromebooks were going to be a problem in 3 years. Where are we in that cycle?
So we obviously got a huge number of Chromebooks in 2020 as part of the shift to online learning during COVID. We replaced a whole bunch of them with ESSER funds, so we were really thoughtful about how we used our ESSER 1, 2, and 3 money to make sure that we were able to replace technology as it came up for replacement. We are in a place now where the Instructional Technology Director Mike Tinker is looking to be replacing Chromebooks at grade 2, grade 6, and grade 9. So at 3 points over the student's career in the school district, they'd be receiving a new device. Our second graders in pre-K, K, and 1 use an iPad. So when you start in second grade, that's your first time with a Chromebook. So there's about 560 Chromebooks that they'd be looking to replace moving into the next school year. It's not unheard of to keep a Chromebook for 4 years. So if we are unable to fund the Chromebook replacement for next year, then there would be devices that are 4 years old. Obviously there are students that take really good care of their device, and there are students that take less good care of their device. So there's a little bit of that. We do have some money from an old capital item out there for Chromebooks as well, so we can access that if we don't have year-end funds to put towards that purchase.
And I know Michael Tinker also mentioned that the place in which computers tend to get the most wear and tear is in the transport between home and school. So making sure they are in some sort of bag that has some structure, I think, can also help lengthen the life of the computers.
The last thing is the enrollment reductions that we are taking. So it is not a new idea that enrollment across the district is declining. I do think it's important to point out that you're talking about declining enrollment over 13 grades and 5 buildings. So there's not always like a big number of positions in any one place at any one time that we can cut. It's generally 3 or 4 kids in a grade level at a particular school, which does not necessarily facilitate reducing by a classroom section. Moving into next year, we have identified that we would be able to run with 1 less section of grade 3 here at North Pembroke, 1 less section of grade 6 at Hobbamock, and based off of the enrollment at the middle school, we'd be able to run with 2 less staff there. So we would have a split team at the middle school. The students won't notice a difference, but what the staff would realize is that there will be 2 staff members that are teaching both 7th and 8th grade, so 2 sections of 7th grade and 3 sections of 8th grade. We are also reducing a district-wide position in the form of an English language learner teacher. We have had this position in the budget for the past 2 years, but we have been unsuccessful in filling it. Though the need of our students the number of our L students has gone down very slightly, and the need is still there. We haven't been able to fill the position, so we are looking to reduce it. We are fortunate that of these 5 reductions, there is no staff that gets displaced. They're all realized either through retirements or folks that have already moved on their own, or again, the vacant position for the ELL teacher.
I also would be remiss, well, we have you guys here, to not remind everyone, I did this last year too, we're very fortunate in Pembroke from an administrative perspective. So the superintendent carries both the superintendency licensure, but also a business manager licensure. So most districts, I would say virtually all of the districts across the Commonwealth, have a superintendent of schools and a business manager, right? Erin actually acts in both of those capacities for us.
Some days not well.
for us. I would say most days quite well. But as a result, we save on an administrative salary there. We also, as we pointed out, maybe a shared services model, do not have anyone whose job is solely to manage facilities. If Brian is still here, he does that on a regular basis, as does the superintendent. So there are a lot of hats that get worn by multiple people administratively simply to keep costs down. We've been doing that for years. There will be a point, though, that you won't be able to do it, right? And if we lost the superintendent, you certainly wouldn't be able to do it. You would actually hire two roles. You would hire a business manager and a superintendent. Both are required by every district by law. Both are also hired by the school committee. So I just want to make sure that you guys knew that, were aware of it, because I think it's important.
So in your packets that I shared, I also gave you a couple years of budget information, so fiscal year 23 through what we're proposing for 26. Enrollment in a form that you can read it. I know in the appendix it is smushed to the point where it's not even legible, as well as just an overview of those enrollment reductions I referred to. And then last year we had spent some time in the joint budget subcommittee looking at revolving accounts and what was in each of those accounts. So I did want to share just an update with both boards about where our revolving accounts are at this point.
Go ahead. That's it. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Not questions, just statements.
Sure.
So you also included the enrollment reductions in staff. That's a data point worth sharing with folks, because people always complain, well, wait a minute, enrollment's down, and it keeps going, and the cost keeps going up.
Right.
Well, I did the math. You got 46 less people here, right? So feel free to share that.
I'll publicize that on our website.
No,
I
that's a
mean,
good point.
it's nothing to brag about, but it's, when people are saying, where's my money going? You can say, hey, we're trying,
Yeah.
right? The other thing is, going back to the historical funding picture,
Yeah.
under the school budget as a percentage of the town, I think it's to all of our best interest to make sure this number reflects the reality, all in, all right? Because this town starves for revenue, right? And the other piece to it is, we struggle to get people to get behind commercial development. The reality is, all right, if the reality is 60% of what the town spends is on schools, all right, then that's people that we can hopefully get behind the commercial development. So there's revenue, because we can tell them, look, for every buck we pull in for taxes, 60% of it goes to the schools. So so these commercial businesses, which are actually taxed higher usually than homes, are subsidizing the schools. That's a story we should be telling.
So Tim, I just want to make sure that I have this suggestion. So basically adding the benefit piece so that you basically have a kind of, we want to be like for like with all of the, all of the years, and then add the benefit piece to get a total.
Yeah, we want to make this number all in. And then we need to message it consistently across all of these boards.
I would agree. Anything else? No, good, very good suggestions. Other questions, thoughts, concerns?
No question, just a statement. I mean, we talk about sometimes on the town side, we're pretty lean and mean on the town side. School side, you guys are very clearly lean and mean as well. And I think that's reflected in mentioning the per pupil spending for in-district students, looking at the state versus Pembroke by itself, it's thousands of dollars less per student. However, when you compare for like MCAS performance, Pembroke is in like the top quartile of MCAS scores across a number of different grades. So whereas the state obviously is like maybe around halfway. So the dollars we get and the performance we get out of it are really, it's just really impressive. So definitely hats off just the schools, the way that that's been managed for.
No, thank you, Steve. I will say, going back probably 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago, we were literally in the bottom 10, right? So not 10th, but the bottom 10 of all 381 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of what we spent per pupil. But to your point, our results were usually in the top 25%, right? So we've traditionally here used our money and stretched our money to the absolute best way that we possibly can, whether you're on the town side of things or the school side of things. We are not, thankfully, in the bottom 10 anymore. We've probably moved up to about 23rd or 44th or something like that.
351.
So, yeah, but you know, we have made some investments that were desperately needed and had to make, but we are easily in the bottom third of cost per pupil, right, and spend per pupil, but our results are well ahead of that. So I actually appreciate you pointing that out.
I have a question if I can real quick. So for FY '25, it only shows 3 elementary. We also had to reduce I mean, I know this is the enrollment, but we also had non-enrollment reductions.
Correct.
And we don't, that's not captured anywhere.
No, I didn't give a full list. I only gave those that were
So
related
just,
to enrollment.
there are reductions.
In addition to those, right.
That were not enrollment, they were budget related, that because of,
Yes.
well, yeah, because of changes in the budget, we've had to reduce positions that I'd like to see come back, but, yeah.
Dan?
I just want to point out to the public, especially as the school committee knows this for sure, but the comparative data from like communities for a per pupil cost as opposed to surrounding communities comparison is the most important demographic to look at, because if you take a town like Duxbury, probably, I'm guessing, but I'll bet 20% of all their student body go to private schools. So they have, of all the eligible students, they have a reduction in the kids that go to their actual public school. So that's the best comparative. So I'm glad you highlighted that.
Can I pivot a little bit to the warrant article?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
No, not at all.
The community preservation funded project proposals, there's I think 4 or 5 of them.
Yep.
The one that jumps out is the $500,000 recommendation to replace the playground at Hobomok.
Yep.
I think everybody can agree it needs to be replaced and we should have it.
Yep.
The question that I have, and I think the committee had, was the responsibility to maintain that. Do you have a plan? Is there a plan in place to maintain that, so after the town taxpayers spend $500,000 on it, that it continues to be maintained and taken care of going forward?
Sure, to the extent possible, right? So we have a maintenance department in each of our buildings that the playgrounds, the grounds are an extension of those roles. So the custodians here are responsible for trimming the hedges and raking back the playground mulch and all of those pieces. At Hobomok in particular, Hobomok gets an extensive amount of use outside of the school day. So what we talked about was we do have some funding for exterior security cameras from a capital item 3 years back, adding some security cameras to that space there so that we can have eyes on the playground in off hours. But we need the community to be as invested in preserving the playground as we are, right? Because a lot of the damage that we see at Hobomok is happening on Saturdays and Sundays, not during the student day. Obviously, I think security cameras do prevent some of that, but it isn't going to solve for all of that. But
the ongoing maintenance question, I think, that playground was put in when?
In 2000.
Right. So I think it's a good question, right? Because we're about to make an investment. Is there a way to take care of your investment? That's actually, I think, the heart of the question. I think we've done a pretty good job to the extent that you can especially at Hobomok, with the amount, because think about it, you have soccer, you have sports, you have multiple things. Candidly, I took my kids there all the time when they were little. They're 24. It's the same playground, right? So there is just an age factor to that, a weathering and age factor and what have you. I do think, though, one of the things that we're going to have to figure out as a town is how to better maintain and do more preventative maintenance around not just this, but our facilities and other things. Even had we done that, we would be here, right? It's 25 years. It is well beyond its useful life, but we would not have had to wall off slides tell kids they can't go down slides because it's too dangerous, sort of those types of things. That playground in particular is dangerous. There's danger there that, and I give Allison a lot of credit bringing this up months ago. I give members of the selectmen, I know Steve, you were a big supporter of the playground too with community preservation. We came together to say we have to do something here. I do think that we've shown that we will maintain what we have to the extent possible. 25 years is beyond the useful life of those items, but preventative maintenance is important and we have to keep our eye on it.
I know one of the things that Erin has talked about previously is that she has the custodial facility staff go out and check after a weekend, and so identifying any issues as soon as it might have happened on a weekend, so they are checking and finding if there are any issues or anything like that. And then I know with the security cameras, we can also hopefully rectify and just make announcements if there's something that's broken over the weekend at school committee to just, encourage the community to take care of the space that we share.
And if I can say one part that we kind of have discovered is at a certain point, you can't maintain them because they're not up to like ADA standards. So at some point, the maintenance companies they just straight out won't touch it. So I don't know if we're quite at that point, but we're probably fairly close. And that's why, since I've lived in Pembroke, I think the number of slides at Hallmark have literally looked exactly the same because nobody can touch them. And it's not necessarily a cost factor at this point, it's just
liability.
Yeah, they don't do it.
And I would think that the signage too, like you're on camera, like will help hopefully deter people that traditionally might have just damaged the, played on it really hard. Having some signage saying, oh, you're under for surveillance, so.
And there's a difference between use and malicious, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so I think
Undoing the chain link
right,
fence.
as long as we can combat some of the malicious intent. But.
Hang on. So I read the audit, all right, and the audit said multiple times there was no law that said maintenance was done. There were pictures of chains that were almost worn through. That's a wear item that you should have a plan for, all right? So you're right, there's malicious and there's wear and tear. It looks like the wear and tear didn't happen either. So that's what, I'm the one that brought it up in advisory yesterday, is are we actually going to make sure that we've learned from this mistake and we're going to have somebody, and is there a budget to say, okay, maybe every 2 years replace the chains?
Yeah, so I think what this has helped us do is make a great relationship with Christopher Wood, who owns the company that did the audit. He lives in town, he has a vested interest in it. Some of the things that were pointed out were as easy as the wear on the swing chain, and I think it ended up being $900 to fix it, right? So we do have a maintenance budget, and I think having somebody that can guide us on, what is normal wear and tear, what should we be replacing every 5 years, how often do you replace the bolts, that would come also with the installation of new equipment. There's, obviously the guides that would go with that and warranties telling us what we need to do. I know I have a swing set for my kids, and you're supposed to paint it every however many years. We've never painted it, but I think we are so far behind that we can't get out from underneath it at this point, and that it's gone to the point where it needs to be replaced. But we do have a dedicated maintenance staff at our elementary schools that are more than willing to do whatever needs to be done, and we do have a maintenance budget. So every year we spend about $1,500 to $2,000 at each school replacing the wood chips. As you can see from the proposal, those wood chips no longer exist under the proposal, so we have those funds available to do some of the other maintenance that would be necessary.
It's a fair question, though.
Yep, I agree.
Totally a fair question.
I know one of the other pieces was also having a facilities manager would, I think, in the future, be something we need to look at so that we can keep a very close eye on it.
That would have to be a shared position.
Yeah, I would agree.
Sure.
The other thing is, anyone reached out to the chief of police and asked him if it's often enough that a patrol car could maybe go through the school parking lots on the weekend?
We can talk to Rick about that.
What's the lighting up there? I know like the basketball courts behind Town Hall are lit. I go 24/7. You come home at 1 o'clock in the morning and the lights are on. Are the lights on here? Anyone know?
They're on a schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the ones behind town hall are on schedule too, but if they're using the courts at 1 a.m., they're still on.
Bill, in all the years I've driven home very late at night, I've never seen those lights go off in the middle of the winter. And
I'll check it.
I'm just between you and me.
And it was from a coffee gathering that you were driving
Exactly.
home, correct?
That court is used unbelievable.
Oh, it's...
I'm just in awe how much.
Great asset.
Other warrant questions, or the same one if you
Nope,
have
I'm
it?
good.
So, any other questions?
Yeah, one other warrant
Yeah.
question, just
Huh?
relative to the camera one for the, are they already on the buses, the exterior cameras?
No, so the cameras that we have on our school buses are interior. They do not patrol the stop arm. So if that warrant article were to be approved, that's just the first step in getting that extra safety piece on. We would have to work with First Student and get a price quote for installing those cameras on the bus. The camera that we have is just for behavior management on the bus.
It was a change of state law, so
Yeah.
we didn't have it, so in order for us to even do this, to put cameras and look into it, we have to pass this language. So there's no financial piece right now, it's a matter of if we want to do it, we have to have the language approved first, because it has just last like 6 months that this even became available here in Massachusetts.
That makes sense.
What was 6 months? So the language for the warrant for the stop
stop
sign
arm
camera,
camera.
there's currently, from my understanding, it's a new state law that enables cameras to be used to then like ticket people in that aspect. I guess right now it has to be, they have to be caught passing a school bus. So the change in the language is needed to be put into the town bylaws in order for the cops to then use footage from a camera to enforce what is not always enforced. Because I think my understanding is in the past it would have to be visually seen by a police officer.
So you just call it on the radar.
Yeah, so this is just the first step in making the cameras, I'm sure it's going to be coming, at some point, but right now it's just language to make it so that we can have the ability to let it be enforced at some point, so.
Bus drivers are excited about that one.
Yeah, it's definitely
Dan?
needed.
All right. So we've heard your budget presentation. I just want, for a point of clarity for everyone in the room and at home, the superintendent and the town manager, are you both in agreement with the budget being presented at town meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have our public budget hearing scheduled for April 29th.
April 29th, yeah.
I don't anticipate any changes, but that's an opportunity for anybody to ask us any questions and revisit anything that folks are hoping to, but I think we're in a good place.
Joe?
If we're done with this, I want to just address one item, and if I know the answer, I know Erin knows the answer, and I should have given her a heads up I was going to ask it, I'm sorry. But I've heard recently at a ton of meetings in town that if we add 50 students to the schools, it's $17,000 per student added to our budget. And I say, no, that's not accurate. Can you just address that for us a little bit?
You mean add 50
Because-
students how? Like through
let's say
new
it's a
development
housing
or?
project, Housing development that adds 50 students in our schools. It doesn't cost the town. You're not going to ask for 50
No.
times 17.
No, you can look at our enrollment and see,
17,000.
let's say that the students, let's say the development's in North, I have no idea what the development is that you're talking about. Unless all 50 students are in one grade, we would have to add a teacher or two, but there is capacity in almost every single grade across the district to add a handful of students. I'm not familiar with any housing development that says you can only move in if you have a fourth grader, but
Can we do that?
But we are also talking about school choice at the April 29th meeting as well, because that is one of those things that we talk about too. School choice is allowing students from other districts to come to Pembroke Public Schools, and you get just $5,000 for the student when they come. So why would you ever do that if it costs you $17,000 to educate a student? Because there's a break-even point, right? If I have 18 first graders and there's 2 that want to join, I can get $10,000, but I don't need to add a teacher. I don't need to add a para. There's minimal overhead that I need to add. So no, we would not be asking for the equivalent of 50 times our per pupil expenditure. There may, if it's a huge number of students, be some transportation concerns, but instructionally across the district, we do have some capacity at all of our grade levels.
And I actually think, Bill, this is the flip side to what we say to you guys a lot, right? Because the other thing we hear is, well, you've lost 150 students, why isn't your enrollment going down? And I say all the time, well, we were not just losing 150 first, second, and third graders, right? They're throughout the entire district. Well, there's a benefit side to that, and it's this, right? So if there are developments going into town where we're getting 100 kids, those 100 kids cascade through the grade levels. So it's not just an immediate, you have to add. And as Aaron pointed out, if you look at the enrollment and the student-teacher ratios, and I think we've given you guys 10 years worth, you can actually see they've been pretty consistent, but we could absolutely absorb some kids. I would take it a step further. Years ago, when we had the bubble, the proverbial bubble that went through, I think the last one graduated in 2019, we were like, we're busting at the seams, we can't take any more, oh my gosh. We're begging for developments with young families, with kids. It's a good thing. We have the room, we have the capacity in our buildings. There is absorption that can take place. And even if you add a teacher or two when you're talking about that level, what you're getting in the additional Chapter 70 funding and in the additional per pupil funding from the Commonwealth will make up for that, because it's not a one-to-one, right? We will make money if there are multiple kids. So yeah, please, if there are developers out there that want to build a bunch of houses and bring families in, come to Pembroke.
Yeah, we need the students, like, it's a benefit to us, it's
Right.
not a bad thing.
And that was the purpose of me asking the question, twofold. Yes, we want commercial development. They don't put students in the schools, and they pay a lot more tax than residential. But we could use some residential development too, and if we can get that development, it adds to our new growth number, and it allows us to get out of the current budget deficit that we're in. So I just want to encourage everyone, don't be a big naysayer to residential development just because it's going to put more students in the schools. I think that's a positive to us. Now, if we get a 600-unit 40B project, I'll think differently about that, but let's work to get the smaller projects, which really we don't have right now, so we can get over the 10% and then control some of those 600-unit projects.
What is the average or expected enrollment per grade?
So, yeah, it's in your packet. The long sheets show you by grade by school. The top box is next year's projected numbers.
I need a magnifying glass, like, just to be clear with you, right?
At North, over the seven grades, there's 420 students this year. We're projected to have 410 next year. So again, not much of a difference there across 7 grades. I'm sorry, that was Bryanville. At Hobomok, there's 391 students this year. Next year, we're projecting 382. At North, it's 438, and next year, we're projecting 433. So the only number that is still unknown at this point is our kindergarten number. Kindergarten registration happens through March and April and really into May when we start kindergarten screening. So we are seeing a healthy number of kindergartners registering at each of the 3 elementary schools, but as you can see, there's a difference of 10 students over 7 grades, 10 or less across those 3 buildings. So
Go ahead.
How do you decide what programs or curriculum courses that you offer? How is the decision made? Is it by the, you think it's a good idea, we would offer it, the kids might like it, or is it requests from the students to have, my pet peeve always was 3rd and 4th year of Latin.
Sure. So we have a pretty robust program of studies, both at our middle school and our high school, that lists all of our course offerings, but we only run what kids pick. So we do really let students and family drive a lot of the choice at that level, and we have gotten to the point in years where there needs to be a certain number of kids that want to take AP Euro or AP Gov or ceramics in order for us to offer it. So we do really allow students to be the driver in those decisions at our secondary level as far as choice.
Is there a minimum number?
No.
There isn't a minimum number for things like AP Latin or AP French or AP Spanish, because we commit to a pathway for students. So if in 7th and 8th grade you're taking French A and French B at the high school, at the middle school, and then you take French 2 as a freshman, we're committed to getting you all the way through the AP pathway. For some of our other courses, like AP Gov, we have a second AP Spanish course this year. They tend to run every other year. so that students have the opportunity as a junior or a senior to take the course, because the numbers are really like 7 or 8. And we've gotten to the point with our enrollment and with what we have for staffing that we can't really run sections of 7 and 8 for multiple things. So we do try to run them every other year so that kids have the opportunity over the course of their time at the high school.
Other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
As far as, students who are interested in vocational aspirations, I don't think we talked about that this evening. Are we having any issues with getting those students into either Silver Lake or Norfolk or one of the other areas?
Sure. So currently, our students are absolutely able to access Norfolk Aggie or any of the agricultural schools in the state. That has been consistent. We've actually seen a few more students each year get accepted. In years past, it has been 3 or 4. Now we're seeing 7s and 8s. But we don't have a pathway for students that are interested in a traditional Chapter 74 vocational program. So cosmetology, carpentry, automotive, we don't have that. Up until 3 years ago, we were successful in having students access either Silver Lake or South Shore VoTech for those options. But with the change in the admission language, we have not had students successfully be admitted to either of those programs in 3 years. So our last group of students in those schools are seniors this year. The change in the language does say that they have to take all of the students in their member towns that meet the minimum entrance criteria before they can give seats to students out of town. We all know that there's been a huge increase in the interest in vocational schools, so all of those seats are being filled by member town students. We have been working pretty extensively as a committee and a regional planning subcommittee to take a look at what it would look like to join South Shore Tech as a member town. We had a presentation, I think, the end of March here at the school committee level. It's on our website as well as far as what it looks like to join South Shore Tech. Obviously, there's a couple of pieces to that. South Shore Tech is undergoing a very large building project as well. So if we were going to be joining, we'd have to kind of buy into that building project. And then we'd have to talk about what it looks like to fund students going to a vocational, because we currently don't have that built into our budget. So right now, we don't have a lot of access for kids. There's minimal access. There's times where there could be a program at Silver Lake that is under-enrolled with their own students, and we are successfully able to match a sophomore that can transfer over there. So there are some one-offs, but there are really no 8th grade seats, incoming 9th grade seats going to Pembroke students at either South Shore Tech or at Silver Lake.
So what happens to those students as far as like what they're interested in for a career? Is that something they have to do on their own and pay for, either during high school or after high school?
So for most of those students, they would end up attending Pembroke High School. There are a lot of opportunities at the vocational schools in the area to do some after-hours, shop hours. There's some apprenticeship programs, but it's really something that students and families would be exploring outside of the traditional school day. There's no opportunity, there's no private school, right? There's no opportunity to just pay and go for families.
The pathway program might offer a student an opportunity to do that. It's basically like an internship type of thing. But for the most part, yeah, there's a crisis in the Commonwealth around vocational education, right? There are far more kids that want access in just few 2 seats. The presentation that we did a couple of weeks ago, that was very prevalent. It was very clear. We will, if we decide to move forward, and I believe the committee on May 6th may have a motion to move something forward as a placeholder for the fall town meeting. But that is going to require a significant investment in the town, right? And you guys, as the advisory committee, I believe the Board of Selectmen is already well aware of that. That buy-in to the new school would be about $20 million, if memory serves me right.
For the building project, yes.
Right, for the building project, and then you would need another operational override to cover what you believe the tuition liability would be. We would be remiss to go in and say, yes, we want to join, and then have no ability to pay. So those are the discussions that will have to be had in the community over the next many months.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, the per household tax amount would be around $450 for a house
an
that's
average
around
house.
$600,000. Yeah.
The best way to approach it would be for the state to step in and have 3 or 4 regional VOTECs that the state pays for and towns buy into. The state pays for the school, the towns amortize the cost over time, because a brand new VOTEC is going to be 250 to 300 million, easy, all day. So if the state picked a couple of regional spots that would alleviate the current VOTECs, all the pressure on them, and then they have the money to be able to build a facility and let the towns pay it back to the state over time. But something for our legislators.
I agree, Dan. I will also say that keep in mind that language change was a legislative item, right? So this wasn't something that South Shore VOTEC changed their language or Silver Lake changed their language. This was a change that was made by the legislature, right? So, call your legislators, tell them that vocational education is important. Tell them that kids deserve access to vocational education. To your point, Dan, I agree, right? It's because in essence, what happens is this is a partially unfunded mandate, right? So you do get partial reimbursement for the cost of the tuition, but it's nowhere near what you end up having to actually pay, whether you're a member of community or not. So these are things that call your legislator and let them know it's important.
I was going to say, I think the change of the language was also like an unintended consequence for towns like Pembroke, because I think the reason they changed it 3 or 4 years ago was, my understanding is, Boston.
It was driven by urban school districts.
Yeah,
Yes,
urban school districts who have VOTECs didn't want to keep paying for their kids to go outside.
Right.
So they changed it so that their kids had to stay in their VOTECs and not go to the outside ones. And so what happened to Pembroke wasn't the reason for the change, but it's what happened. And so we're kind of now stuck in this limbo of our students want to be able to go there, but the way the law is written, it completely prevents them. And so and I think the size of the urban schools outsize everybody else, and so they have no reason to change it really. So as much as our local legislators, I feel, support us, understand what we're asking for, it's not necessarily possible just based on the demographic size of the urban areas. And so they didn't, as far as I can tell, do it on purpose. It's just kind of, unfortunately, how it worked out.
I think also it's important to name that, I've been hearing from lots of families about how much they want vocational education, and I think we don't necessarily have time to wait, right? I think if we want to have our trades be successful in our local area and be able to fill that need, which we know that there's a need for those trades, and also for students to feel successful that might not otherwise be successful in Pembroke High School, I think we definitely have to give a good look at joining South Shore VOTEC. One thing I do also know is that they've taken really good care of their equipment, so they do get some of the money that they would have had to pay, they're getting some sort of, I forget what the word is, but they get money back for taking good care of the equipment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Okay, so any kind of going once, going twice on Mr. Siciotti?
I think it's worth noting, obviously we're talking about enrollment, declining enrollment. We're talking about the increase of cost of the school in spite of the declining enrollment. And we've lost 1,000 students since about 10 years ago. It's worth noting that the rate of declining enrollment is declining.
Right.
So whereas it started losing 150 students, it dropped down to losing 100 students, then 80 students, and 70, and last year it looks like 48. So it looks like the hemorrhaging is slowing down, which is good. I am just curious, what's the driving function behind it? Is it just people are having less kids? Because the population in Pembroke has actually, over history, has grown slightly and is now about steady. So it seems like it's just people are having less kids. I'm curious if you're seeing any other reasons, if there's anything
Yeah, the
within
birth rate is
control.
definitely down in the state. So keep in mind, our incoming kindergartners would be COVID babies, right? So be interested to see what it looks like for the fall of '26, because those would, I think, we may see a drop off in that year for incoming kindergartners as well.
So the birth rate's declining, but the population in the Commonwealth is declining, right? So we're losing people to other areas of the country at the moment.
Well, and that's
So-
why I mentioned Pembroke specifically, is even though most other areas of Massachusetts have been declining, people
God bless
leaving.
you.
Bless you. But Pembroke specifically has been steady or increasing over time. So
Yeah.
people are still coming to Pembroke, or at least staying in Pembroke, or on net is about the same.
Our population's age, though.
Yeah.
The average
People are
age.
aging at home,
Yeah.
not,
Mm.
and I think that the changeover of, the starter homes aren't being sold because people are aging in place a lot more, I think, than they might have.
I think a lot of people can't afford to move, just speaking to some of the people that I know specifically. So aging in place is the option.
That's good to know. The only other thing I was going to mention is obviously the per pupil increase is higher than inflation. So I think most of us here know why, what that other kind of piece is as to why, in spite of declining enrollment, prices are going up, the cost of schools are going up higher than inflation. Can you guys speak to that a little bit, especially for the public, as to why?
Go ahead.
So I think the level of service that is provided by a school district is far different than just a classroom teacher. So the support services that each of our buildings offers, the surround, the educating the full student piece of it. There was a time just 5 years ago where we had 2 social workers in the entire school district. Now we have 6. We used to share a lot of positions across the district, whether it was school psychologists. Our special education numbers have increased. Just presented during our student services budget that there used to be a space between us and where the state percentage was. We are now pretty much at the state percentage, which I think is 18%.
Yeah.
20% of students. We also have seen an increase in students on 504 plans, which just means the level of service that a student requires from the school district is far different and greater than it has been in the past. And, what we're seeing as a result of COVID is a little bit more needs from our students in the social area, in addition to some academic gaps. So really making up for those pieces, I think, does explain why the cost is exceeding that, cost increase is exceeding the inflation increase.
And I think our new program that we're suggesting is trying to solve for that so that we can make sure that we don't necessarily have to send as many students out of district with the increasing need, and find a way to have it be more, first, they're in our community, but also long-term it will save us money, I think.
Sure. The biggest driver of our budget is salaries also. So as wages in the state increase to catch up with inflation, wages here through our collective bargaining agreements and other agreements also are increasing at a higher rate than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I just want to caveat what Katrina said just a little bit, right? That program won't solve this problem. The program will help slow the growth rate of this problem, right? This is my second to last meeting ever. After 20 years of doing this work, right? I remember when I first started, we bought a piano that was a huge to-do, and nobody can understand why and everything else. And I think back to, we were talking about, do we buy a piano? And now we're talking about BCBAs and school psychologists and paraprofessionals and the number of kids that require additional services. It's and, right? Society has turned to the school to not only mold citizens and mold children, but it is the entryway into behavioral health services. It is the entryway into social services. It is the entryway for bringing the family unit together and for keeping it there, right? It has become the service entry, and it's not a choice, right? It's not one of those things that we can sit back and say, well, we're good, kind of a good Yankee town, we're just not going to do that, it's too expensive, right? These are things that are requirements that are brought down via state government, right? Even special education services, because I've sat around this table many times, I'm a big believer that every child deserves a free, fair, and public education. That's why I've done this work for over 2 decades. But to do that, those services have skyrocketed in cost, right? I mean, we talked about, we have one student at $250,000 in an out-of-district placement. So it's a combination of all of those things, right? It's not any one thing, it's all of those things together. is why I think at the end of the day, we've grown, and I would say most districts have grown at a rate higher than inflation. And that was hard to do over the last couple of years.
And when it comes to sped, we have no say in the
No say,
tuition.
that's right.
Because you have to
We-
provide FAPE.
So whatever
it's a
they
law.
charge, we're,
You have to pay,
Yeah.
yeah.
which is
was-
another
Could-
legislative
Could you
thing
help me
we would like
understand
to have.
something?
Yeah.
To what you said? So as we're looking at the administrative priorities, there are several social interventionists that
Mhm.
you just kind of touched on, and maybe one math interventionist.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, what's driving that? Are the children of today, do they need more social and behavioral intervention, or is it just a realization that they always did, and let's help them? What do
So-
you think drives that?
Great question.
I'm gonna start, and then I'll
Yeah.
turn it over to you. I think what's really important is, out of, I think it's 6 of those roles, the first 2 are to start this program that we keep talking about, that we hope can actually be revenue generating, self-sustaining and revenue generating down the road. So that is 2 of them. But the direct answer and the short answer is yes, right? The needs that kids are presenting with are greater and are different than they were certainly when you and I were younger, I think, Dan. But, so yeah, the need is absolutely there. What we're being asked to do from state government to town government to the schools is much greater than what it was before. And I think COVID has a bit to do with that too, right? Coming out of COVID, coming out of the lockdown, and the needs of kids also has something to do with it. But
Yeah, I think our teachers are seeing more behaviors than we've seen in the past, but I also think our expectations of students has changed drastically as well. So if you look back at how school readiness was defined, like in the late 80s, you had 9 teeth, you did this, you did that. Now you need to be able
did you say
to-
9 teeth?
It was about, it focused on physical growth, so teeth, like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
dexterity. If you look at it now, we're looking for kids that are coming to kindergarten able to read. And I do think the rigor of the curriculum has definitely advanced over the past 15 years. And some students don't know what to do with that. And that manifests itself in behaviors. But I also think we lost a whole group of time where kids learned how to interact socially, whether they're toddlers or teenagers, because I think we see the same behavior at the middle school and the high school as a result of COVID. Kids forgot how to be a friend, how to make a friend, and how to keep a friend. And I think our teachers and our staff spend a lot of time managing the social piece of it in order to make sure that the rest of the class can stay on track with the curriculum as well. So I would argue we need the math interventionist and the behavior interventionist, but I do think that what you'll hear from staff is that behaviors in classrooms looks drastically different than it has looked in the past.
And I also want to add, I think cell phones, social media, all of
There's a
that
million
has
things.
changed the generation dramatically. I feel like a lot of books are out there on that too, showing that has made it dramatic change in rates of depression and stuff like that too. So I think there's a lot of things that are all happening at once that all end up, showing in the classroom basically.
Yeah, and a lot of those positions too are also figuring out what the function is of the behavior. So while we might not know the direct cause, we can at least figure out what it looks like within the classroom to figure out what the child is seeking or what the missing need is or the lagging skill, so that then they can be more available for learning. Because I think if you have a kid who's totally not regulated and just kind of, lots of us have had kids and they're just losing it sometimes, right? And so they won't be available for learning for math if they have these unmet needs that we don't know. And having these roles where we can take that data and be able to then analyze it to figure out what interventions need to be put in place makes them more available for learning across the board.
Okay, so I promise this is the final, go ahead. Final one.
I brought up 2 questions.
Mm.
What is the school system regarding cell phones during the day? And second of all, there was an article in the paper today about AI and the use in schools as to whether it's allowed or not. Is it allowed for the teachers? Is it allowed for the students? Either or both?
Sure. So cell phones vary a little bit based off of the age level of students. So there's really no cell phone use during the school day for students in elementary schools. I know that students have cell phones. We do manage a little bit of cell phone usage on buses, but there's no purpose or use of the phone during the instructional day. Our middle school is a no cell phone school. So students as well as staff are expected to have their cell phone off and away while they're at the middle school. We've had some great success with that. It was a bit of an uphill battle at first because during COVID we did allow students to use their cell phones during unstructured times like lunchtime and whatnot because you couldn't sit with your friends, so let's text with your friend that's at the next table. So we did have to do a little bit of work with students to get back to a place where you should be talking to your friend instead of texting them from the table next to you. So Donna and the staff at the middle school do a great job with that. The high school is really class specific, so there are some classrooms that the teacher uses the phone as an educational device, and there's others that have the phone hotel where you put your phone in the cubby as soon as you walk in. It's really teacher dependent there. Students are allowed to be on their phones in a study hall or while passing in the hallways of the high school. AI is a very interesting topic. We have spent a lot of time with our staff really in the professional development realm of how to use it as a tool. It's a tool that's out there. Let's figure out how to use it and how to use it effectively, both for staff and for students. So I know there's definitely stories out there about AI linked to plagiarism, and I think our approach to it has really been to educate students on how you can use it as a tool for your research, but not as a substitute for the work. And so I think Jonathan Shapiro has presented a couple times, our STEM coordinator, to this committee just about how we work with staff and how we work with students on how to use it to enhance your educational experience, not replace the work. So,
My fourth grader had homework this week on, there's a whole ELA section on reading about that, and she had to write a little bit, and so just it's kind of funny that they came up tonight because it's being discussed in the schools, and it's part of the homework was discussing how things are just straight out incorrect, like you have to analyze it and look at it. So it was, she's 9, so.
And it was something we did discuss at policy recently, as a policy subcommittee, about AI and about cell phones, and we figured out that right now our policies are in line with other districts and we don't need to make a change, but that doesn't mean there won't be a change. It's just right now we're good with where those policies are, and we haven't heard a huge need from our administrators around a policy change.
Okay, I don't see any hands. We have an executive session after this too, so I'm not giving you the bum's rush. But so at 8:36, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh wait, no, sorry. I apologize. We're going to executive session. You guys can adjourn your sessions though, please.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Aye. It's unanimous and vote counts. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for all the questions and participation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So I will entertain a motion to enter executive session pursuant to Chapter 38, Section 21A3 to discuss strategy related to collective bargaining, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the legal position of the school committee as declared by the chair.
So moved. Second.
So motion by Katrina, seconded by Allison, by roll call vote. Sue?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
It's a rough time of year for us, but here we go.